You're listening to Beyond the Campaign, and this is a bonus episode. Welcome to Beyond the Campaign. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, podcast publicist, author, and host of this show and Read the Damn Book. Here, you're going to learn from political candidates and from politicians. We're not just going to talk about the issues. We're going to talk about the human beings who are investing themselves in us so that we can invest ourselves in them. This is Beyond the Campaign. Hey friends, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and this is a bonus episode in which I am bringing you my conversation with Texas State Representative Vince Perez. He represents the great people of El Paso, and we are talking about the breaking of the quorum that is happening right now, redistricting in Texas, but also what California is planning to do in bringing this to their voters, that would be myself included, this November. The big difference is that Governor Newsom trusts the people of California to vote for the right thing. This is a very important topic, and Representative Perez breaks it down beautifully so that you can understand what exactly is at stake, not just for Texans, but for all of America, and what this will mean for the rest of the presidency and beyond. It's important. So please take a moment to listen up, learn, and if you're in California, we've got a job to do. Hello, Representative Perez.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. And I know it's afternoon for you. So good afternoon. I still have my coffee since it is morning for me. I am so excited to meet you, get to know you. I feel like I do because I've seen you on TV. You were with my governor yesterday. So
Right.
Can you take a moment to introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Yeah, my name's Vince Perez. I'm the state representative for El Paso, Texas.
And I've been through El Paso a number of times, especially as I drove from California to Houston and beyond. And I actually was a resident of Texas for a couple of years. I was a Texan many, many moons ago.
Oh, very good.
So I have an appreciation for Texas sometimes, very much
Yeah.
so right now. I think that what you guys are doing is
Okay.
incredible. It is taking a stand. So let's talk about that. I do want to talk about who you are, though, too, so we can get into that as well. But for folks who don't understand what's going on, can you give them an update on what it means to break quorum, what the goal is? How long is this going to last?
Yeah. Well, it's a super important topic, and it's a difficult topic to explain to folks, just because a lot of people don't understand how redistricting impacts them. But basically, and why this is so controversial, this is the easiest way for the government to uh, manipulate its population and do whatever it needs to do, whether it be a political thing or a racial thing or however. It can draw the lines to where the government has an advantage on who has the loudest voices in the state. And so, how these lines are drawn, if drawn unfairly, like in Texas's case, it can really, help one side really elevate some voices while at the same time suppressing other voices. And that's why I think once people understand the different strategies that are used by states who use this in a bad way, that's why there can be a significant imbalance in terms of whose voices the government elevates and whose voices they don't.
And historically, I'm not familiar with how has Texas drawn their lines. I know that in California, we have an independent committee that does it. They are mixed with Republicans, Democrats, and independents to make it fair so that we don't see what is going on right now. How does Texas normally do it?
Well. So look, so Texas has a bad history, and as does the Southern United States, where there was a history of racism. So one of the biggest reasons for the Voting Rights Act was to stop what was happening in states like Texas and other states throughout the Deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, North Carolina, where they persistently would do whatever they could to prevent predominantly Black residents from voting. They would there were barriers to voter registration, so they wouldn't allow Black residents to register to vote, and that was one problem where even though they had 50% Black population in certain states, there were zero registered voters from those communities. Then finally, when Black residents started to get registered to vote, Then they made it more difficult to actually cast a ballot. That's where they would do things like literacy tests, and they would you had to get a certain score in order to have the ability to vote. And so all of these things were designed to just make it as difficult as possible, if not, well, impossible for Black residents to vote. Then they implemented poll taxes. You actually had to pay to come in and cast a ballot, and that was also done to silence votes. And redistricting is another thing that states use to silence the vote. And so you've had all of these things, the barriers to registration, these poll taxes to prevent you from casting a ballot, and then there's this level of redistricting, which is a stealthier way of suppressing the vote. But again, this is probably the most impactful in terms of impacting the actual levels of people who vote, and also where they vote is very key. And I think that's what people need to understand, is that the state can really, that's what the state is doing. The state is deciding where you vote and which district. So you can live in one part of Texas, but this congressperson is going to be in another part, and really how they draw the lines is going to determine where you vote. And that's how the state gets strategic on dividing up, these communities. Again, when it's done when there's a nefarious interest here, or a nefarious motive, they can silence communities, and that's what's happening here in Texas. So Texas has a history of suppressing votes, and that's one reason, again, for the Voting Rights Act. And so I forgot when this started, but one important part of the Voting Rights Act was that states like Texas and other states throughout the South had to, every time they would redistrict after every census, they had to submit their maps for pre-approval. They couldn't even go into effect automatically. So they had to submit it for pre-approval because they had such a history of racism that they had to have their maps checked by the Department of Justice and federal judges before they could go into effect. What happened in 2013, the Supreme Court struck down that part of the Voting Rights Act. So for the last 12 years, we've been in a situation where states like Texas and other southern states that have had a history of racism now don't have any more requirements to check their maps ahead of time. So states like North Carolina, Louisiana, and Texas are deliberately passing very segregationist maps to see what they can get away with. And so far, the courts have overturned, even conservative courts have overturned one in Louisiana. One in Alabama just got overturned this week. And right now there's another case in North Carolina. But the problem is that there's a long delay by the time the courts get to these. So Texas is seeing an opportunity, saying, well, let's see what we can get away with. And for the next 2 years, we might have 5 additional Republican seats by cheating and discriminating against Hispanic and Black Texans.
It's absolutely incredible. It's mind-boggling to me that all of this continues to exist today. It's beyond me, but I was reading a book last night in which there was a quote that you can change the laws, but you can't change the hearts of those who stand by those laws. And I think we continue to see that, especially now in all of this. Who made this decision of, hey, let's get together and we're going to leave the state? And I think it's the most incredible, bold thing that we are seeing happen, because all too often people are wondering, what are the Democrats doing? And for you all to take action, people are moving their families. Illinois is welcoming you. California, we welcome you. Who decided that? What was that like, that moment of, hey, let's get together and really take action and do something, even though it could be at the detriment of, we don't know what's going to happen?
When President Trump said that he wanted 5 additional congressional seats, and he told Governor Abbott, hey, find me 5 congressional seats, the only way to do that in Texas is by taking those votes away from Black and Hispanic communities, and deliberately putting Black and Hispanic residents in districts where their vote will count significantly less. That's the only way to do it in Texas. Texas is almost as diverse as California. That's something I was talking to Governor Newsom about. The Latino population here in Texas, on a percentage basis, is starting to exceed that of California. I don't know if the governor liked that, because they're very proud to have the number one the largest population in the nation. But it just reflects that Texas is a very diverse state, and people don't understand that. But again, when President Trump said that, the only way to do it is to really hurt a lot of people and to really aggressively discriminate against a lot of people. So that's when I think Democrats started realizing no matter what map comes out, it's going to be bad. I mean, it's going to be really bad because there's the only way you can do something so drastic as 5 seats is to disenfranchise a lot of people. So when the map actually came out, it certainly confirmed a lot of our fears that this was as bad as it gets. And this was a deliberate attempt to, again, disenfranchise such a large group of people in Texas. And we really weren't left with many options at that point. That they were trying to rush this through. We these sessions last for 30 days, and for the first 2 weeks there wasn't a map. So they had hearings and they took testimony from people just to take testimony, but there wasn't really a map for people to actually comment on. The map dropped over a week ago. When right around when this started, there was one hearing, and that was going to be it. They were going to ram this through. They did not want to talk about the details of this map because I think it's indefensible. I think every American, when they learn the details of this map, would be appalled at the level of segregation that is being discussed here in the year 2025. But again, if their objective is to just deliver 5 votes for Trump, even temporarily, no matter how discriminatory, no matter how segregationist, they're going to do it. And that's the concern, is that they're giving these 5 congressional seats at all costs, even if it does take us back to 1964, the year before the Voting Rights Act took effect.
And so you guys leaving the state and breaking quorum, has this happened before? Because I don't recall this ever actually happening and making the news in such a way.
So it has happened before, and it's something that's not too common in Texas history, but it has happened about 3 times in the last 25 years. So in the early 2000s, there was an effort to redistrict Texas, and then after the 2010 census, there was another effort that was controversial, and then in 2021 there was a quorum break over a different issue. It wasn't over redistricting, but over another voting law that Republicans were trying to make it much more difficult for people in Texas to vote. And so some Democrats left in 2021. I wasn't part of the legislature. I just started in January, but that was the last time this happened. But it's a tool that's used as a last resort. This isn't something that happens often. I think it's getting a lot of attention right now because the way that things are going in this country, you're right. A lot of people are asking, what are Democrats doing to stop this? And a lot of times, yeah, we can feel powerless, and scratching our heads like, what can we do about certain things? And this is one tool that is at our disposal. And I think that when people look at just how bad these maps are and the implications that it's going to have for generations of Texans and their influence in the state, I think Democrats had no choice but to do this. And I think ultimately it's the right thing. And yeah, a lot of Democrats, it's not easy to leave your home for long periods of time, and many representatives have kids and families that they have left behind, spouses, and and it can be a strain. School is starting this week, and a lot of representatives, have their kids starting school. I have there's one representative here who. His kid is starting the very first day of school, like kindergarten, and he's missing that, and he got a little teary-eyed talking about it because it's a big sacrifice for him, and it's things like that I think people just it's not easy to just go away from your family for such a period of time, and do this, and then have all the pressure and all these security threats and personal threats and the threat of arrest. It's hard on families.
And that was going to be my next question. You started in January and you're drinking from a fire hose, because I am sure that when you ran for office, you did not think this is what's going to happen. And you have family too. You have a fiance. You have 2 dogs. You're leaving all of them behind too. What is that like to? First of all, I think that being an elected official is it's a difficult job, no matter how you look at it, because you do have constituents who are constantly telling you what they want. You're now in a government where we have it's chaos. It's nonstop. You're being thrown something every day. You're being in Texas, Governor Abbott, he's a hot mess right up there with Trump. But what is this like for you personally? Like, how are you feeling of, wow, I really shouldn't have taken this job, or yes, I am the man for the moment? Because I mean, you do have, there's an arrest out for you. this isn't supposed to be what your job is, and yet it is. So how are you doing?
Well, I mean, I feel more fortunate than a lot of other representatives. I don't have kids, and so that gives me a little bit more flexibility where it's one less thing I guess I have to worry about. I did leave my three dogs behind at home, and I felt terrible imposing the burden on my parents because they're caring for my 98-year-old grandmother who recently had a stroke. And so they were very kind. And of course, they're always going to say, hey, whatever you need, we'll take care of your house. We'll take care of your dogs while you're gone. I just hate imposing this on my family during this time. But I'm fortunate that I feel like I'm a little bit more flexible than other folks. And so for me, like it's a tremendous privilege to serve. I was previously a local elected official. I was a county commissioner for 8 years and had the privilege of serving my community in that capacity for 8 years. And I was county commissioner under the first Trump administration. And so there were already a lot of fights, not nearly as bad as this one. I think the administration was still figuring things out on all the things that it could do. But we did have our share of fights at the local level where, we were figuring out how to respond to many of the Trump administration policies, particularly with the separation of families that was initiated under the Trump administration. And as county elected officials, we have jurisdiction over a lot of the jails and things where the federal government was using certain facilities. But yeah, I mean, I'm one of the few representatives because of the way all these lines are drawn. I'm born and raised for my community. So I have a good sense of just how bad, this types of policies and this redistricting is going to have on them. And, we've got to stand up and I've got to make sure that, uh, you know, my community is not going to be worse off, when by the time I get out of here than when I first started. And that's really the fight is we want to just ultimately make things better for our communities, more fair, more equal. But there's a lot of challenges under this administration that are making it certainly difficult.
How long do you think this quorum is going, the break of the quorum is going to last? Like, you can't be on the road indefinitely. At some point, I figure everyone's going to come home, but how long does this last? Is it a waiting game to see if the Republicans will, falter and decide, okay, they're not going to give up, so we have to do something, or California is going to come at us too, so maybe it's not worth it? What's the future look like in all of this?
That's probably the number one question we get asked. Uh, and one thing I bring up is I think one, people need to understand the significant amount of harm that's going to be done to millions of Texans, particularly Hispanic and Black Texans. If this map goes through, Hispanic Texans will be the most underrepresented, most discriminated group in all 50 states, surpassing the level of discrimination in the Deep South that still currently exists. I think Mississippi has some of the biggest gaps in terms of its representation with its Black residents. Texas Hispanics will now be by far, I mean, far worse than what it is in Mississippi for Black residents. So people need to understand that there are going to be long-term consequences to this. So, uh, to fight this, I think, Democrats are committed to raising awareness to this issue and to stopping this, special session where they were trying to ram this through very quickly. There's a little over a week left in this special session. I feel like that there's very strong resolve, especially just from all the, the response that we've gotten from the nation, not just from Texas in this effort. And so I think it's going to be a significant thing if Democrats can prevent this from going through in this first special session, and raise awareness so more Americans know what Texas is trying to do. The reason the California trip was so important is because we took that opportunity to talk with Governor Newsom, and the critical thing that he announced was that the state of California isn't going to just stand by and accept this. They are going to put something on the ballot, and there's going to have repercussions for what Texas is doing. And it's going to be a big deal if California can cancel out what Texas is attempting to do, because Texas, is the second largest state in the country. There's 38 congressional seats that are at stake. So, if California wants to respond to Texas, it's going to be able to do that. And I think the people of California are doing a tremendous public service for the nation, because what Texas is doing, again, is so overtly discriminatory, so overtly segregationist. I don't think there's any Republican who expects this to be upheld in court. Again, they're just trying to get a 2-year advantage while this thing plays out, and however long it's going to take for the courts to strike it down. So California is really stepping up and doing its part to cancel out this terrible segregationist map that Texas is trying to impact. So I think it's a tremendous public service that that California is able to do that. But
I
I think
appreciate that.
that that's one part of this effort, is that we uh, I don't know if there would still be the same national attention. And look, and this is the challenge. So let me tell you why this is so important, is because California has actually done the right thing. It's taken the politics out of it. Okay, the voters passed a referendum. They put it in their constitution. We don't want to be like Texas. We don't want to have this mess where the government can come in and so blatantly undermine and suppress large segments of its population, right? And we can get into some of the numbers, because it's really quite fascinating. Really quite shocking what Texas is going through. I mean, I think anybody would just be appalled at the level of segregation that's actually being proposed. So they can't do that in California. So there's a challenge there, because in order for California to stop Texas, it's up to the people. And that's the great thing about California, is that California is actually a state that trusts its people, that puts this in the hands of voters and says, hey, voters, we can't do this unless you allow us to. That doesn't happen in Texas. You have a small group of government leaders that draw these lines to their benefit so that you can continue to have the small group of leaders in government. And for the first time in Texas history, you're going to have a Texas government that isn't responsive to the entire state of Texas. It's responsible to a small group, and it's increasingly becoming one smaller racial group. That's what's happening under these maps. So one goal is to, raise awareness to the people of California and explain to them, this is what's happening in Texas, and what's happening in Texas is going to have an impact in California. And so what happened yesterday with the governor was very significant, that California is moving forward and taking this step. And I think however long this quorum break lasts, we need to make that appeal to the people of California about what's at stake here for Texas, but also for the people of California. And so that's one very important goal of this quorum break. However long this lasts, we need to make that appeal to the people of California, because they will decide this in November. And second, it's the more that we can inform all Americans about what's happening, I think is significant. And I think that's also important, because ultimately, if this is going to end up in the courts, this map is so bad, I don't see how it could remain in effect. Again, other maps in Louisiana and North Carolina have been struck down. Louisiana and Alabama have been struck down. The one in North Carolina is terrible. That one should be struck down. If the courts are, truly protect, the check on when government oversteps its bounds. Texas is far worse than all of these maps that have been overturned, but Texas doesn't care. And so this time at least allows us to have this, conversation nationally. If Democrats didn't break quorum, Republicans would have likely snuck this through, and the nation would have just not cared. But the more time that we can buy to explain to America what is happening, and to the broader world what Texas is trying to do, our hope is that that this will be stopped at some point in the road, because every American should be appalled at what Texas is trying here.
I'm fascinated that you've said a few times that every American should be appalled by what's happening. And yet it strikes me that we have American elected officials who are trying to push this through. And that's what I'm appalled by. I'm appalled that these human beings, these Americans, these people who have been elected to represent other citizens are okay with this. And that's the part that it disgusts me, that they want to push such a thing through, that they are okay with the outright racism. And I think we've seen more and more of that because of who we have as our president right now. He's made this all okay. It's acceptable. And so for elected officials to continue to bow down and say, yep, we're good with it, we're going to push it through, that's what appalls me on the biggest level that there is. We should be appalled that these people are elected officials to represent us.
Yes, and I'll tell you that even though I've been in, even though this is my first term when I was a local county commissioner, I've been in public office for about 9 years. Yes, that's the same concern I had, is just how bad does something have to be for somebody on the Republican side to say, well, wait a minute, this is going a little bit too far, right?
Mm-hmm.
The level of segregation that we're creating is probably not somewhere we want to go. No, you're not seeing any of that anytime Donald Trump says he wants something, they're going to deliver it at all costs. And that should be alarming to all of us. And I think this is finally one example of just like, wow, this is pretty egregious. This is taking us literally back to 1964. And maybe I should talk a little bit about that number. As I've said, the Latino population in Texas is about 40% of the population. The percentage of white residents in Texas is also about 40%. So there's 11 million white Texas residents. There's 11 million Latinos. If things were fair and as they are in many states where they've taken politics out of this, you would have about 15 states that where white residents would have control over 15 districts, and they would be able to elect a member of Congress of their choice. And then you would have Latinos who would be representing about that same number, 15 seats, where Latino communities would be able to determine and have a fair shot where you have Latino majority. There could be a mix, there could be coalitions, there could be whatever the thing. I'm just giving these numbers as an example, 15 and 15. This map proposes that 26 out of the 38 will be controlled by white residents. 26 out of 38. 70% of all of the congressional seats is going to be determined by 11 million Texans when there's 30 million of us. That is what is concerning. That is the level of segregation and disproportionality that are in these maps. So, but what does that mean when you divide this number? This is how it breaks down. If you're a white resident, white residents in Texas get one member of Congress for every 430,000 residents, right? Latino Texans get one member of Congress for every 1.4 million. It takes 3 times as many Latinos to get one member of Congress as it does for white residents in Texas. So, effectively, that's how the government dilutes your vote. It takes 3 Texas Latinos to equal the voting power that one white resident delivers for Texas. And when you look at the Black community, they get one member of Congress for every 2 million Black residents. So that means that their vote is 1/5 of that of a white resident in Texas. It takes 5 Black Texans to deliver the same voting power that one white Texan delivers for the state of Texas. That is the inherent unfairness. And also, for the first time, Texas is a massive state. It's the largest in the lower continental states. But somehow Republicans have drawn the lines that they will represent 90% of all white Texans in the state. 90%, stretching from El Paso to the west to Beaumont to the east, the 850 miles in between. Somehow Republicans have drawn the line that they represent 10 million out of the state's 11 million white residents.
It's baffling when you put the numbers to it, when you share how many Black voters are needed versus a white voter. It's disgusting. It's ridiculous. And I hope that anybody listening and watching realizes that this is not okay. It doesn't make sense. It brings us even further back than 64, I think. It's just not okay. We're all human beings. We're all citizens. Every vote should be a vote, not we need 5 of yours to equal 1 of mine. That's just not right. It's not fair, period.
And this is what people need to understand, because they're like, well, how does redistricting impact me? Well, this is how. I mean, the way they draw the lines can make it such to where, you need 3 Latino residents to equal that of a white resident. What really gets me is that the Republicans' favorite line is, oh, well, they do the same thing in California, so that gives us the green light. And this is something I told the governor. Or here in Illinois, they're like, oh, well, Illinois gerrymanders, so, it gives us the green light. When you look at the distribution, this same type of analysis for California and Illinois, no, not even close. We're not even in the same neighborhood. So what Texas is doing is so extreme and so out of the norm that this is going to be the worst map in the country. And Texas Latinos will be the most underrepresented and discriminated group in America.
One other question about if this goes through, say the redistricting passes for Texas, California, we've got it on the ballot for November, that passes, then how long until it takes effect? Because now you have to elect people for these new districts. When would we see this all happening?
Well, this would impact the election next November. And that so the elections would happen. We have the primaries in March of next year, and then the general election in November. So then this would take effect in 2027.
I mean, it's very quick. I think that people don't understand how quickly this 2027 is around the corner.
Yes. And remember, President Trump is trying to what the biggest concern here is President Trump is afraid of losing his majority. And that's why he wants to keep it at all costs, even if it means temporarily, severely discriminating against Hispanic and Black Texans, and even if it means temporarily segregating them. That's what's going to happen. Is that they are just trying to extend the House majority for 2 years. That is what's alarming. Is that there's no level of segregation or discrimination that is too high for this administration, and clearly for Texas Republicans. That is the alarm, and that's why I think every Democratic state in the country should be appalled and do whatever necessary to prevent again this type of racial segregation that's happening here in Texas, because it's going to have implications for the country. But these maps would take that whoever's elected to these new districts would be elected next November. They would take office in January of 2027, and that's all that Trump wants. He's trying to see if these maps can last for 2 years, and then that's what he wants for his presidency.
And then we'll see what happens with him
Right.
after 2028, which is another scary thought.
That's also part of this. I mean, this is factored into all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I want to talk a bit about you too before we wrap things up. All I know is that you've gone to Georgetown. What did you really plan on being when you grew up and as you came out of college? Was this your plan all along, or was there something else you thought you were going to be doing?
I've always been interested in government and public service. Actually, I was part of a um, you know this internship when I was like 16 years old, where I've been doing this kind of public policy work since I was 16, which is probably why I get into it and I get so riled up about it and passionate about it. But I really love my community. I represent such a great place, El Paso, Texas, and I'm just so privileged to be there, one of their representatives. And I just wanted to, I just want to make my community a better place than when I leave. And that's really all that it is for me.
I love that. Your parents and your grandma must be very proud.
That you're very kind. No, well, and that's why I feel so bad. They're really stressed out. And when I was on my way to California yesterday, I got a text message from the daughter of my 90-year-old neighbor. All of my neighbors are elderly, and she said there are a lot of. My mom says that there's a lot of cars out in your neighborhood, out in front of your house, and somebody was trying to get into your backyard. And so I called my parents. I'm like, hey, could you go check on the dogs? I'm really worried that something's happening. There were 6 police cars lined up all the way down my street in front of my house, and then there were other unmarked units. And so my dad had to go down, and there was a large police presence in front of my home. And so I feel really stressed out that I'm putting my family through this, because it rattled them a little bit. It rattled my neighbors. They were very concerned at the level of force, the level of force that was shown in this. And I thought that was unnecessary, but that's what's being done to intimidate the representatives, and that's what's being done to stop this discussion, on all this.
And just so everybody listening is clear, they're looking for you because they want to arrest you. They want to find you and to bring you back. It's not that they were checking up to make sure you're okay.
Yeah, right. No, and under Texas law, the House of Representatives does have the ability. And one reason we have to leave Texas is because if we were in Texas borders, they would have the authority to arrest us anywhere in the state of Texas and bring us back to the Capitol to force us to make the quorum so they can proceed and conduct business and pass this map. So that's why these quorum breaks have happened before. They have to leave the state to get out of the boundaries and the jurisdiction of the Texas police. But so that's why we have to be very careful about where we go and where we travel, because then if I end up in a state where the Republican governor decides to you know pick me up wherever, and if I'm in a Republican state and send me back to Texas, they could.
It's so fascinating. In my lifetime, I don't recall all of this going on. I think this is somewhat unprecedented. And so I'm grateful that you have not only stepped up to do the job that you are doing, but that you are taking these risks, that your family is supporting you. I'm grateful that California is supporting you. And I promise you that we will shout as far and wide and as loud as we can to ensure that Californians know what's going on, and that we step up in this moment, because California needs to, and support you and the residents of Texas. We all need to come together.
Yeah, and pretty soon it's going to be up to the people of California to take the baton and get this through the finish line. This quorum break, I don't know. Again, I don't know how long it's going to last. I hope it lasts long enough to really stop this. But there will come a point where this isn't going to be in the news anymore, and people are going to stop talking about it. And then it's going to be up to the people of California to vote on this. And so I hope everybody understands really just what's at stake when nobody's really going to pay attention to us, and the Republicans are going to do what they're going to do and likely pass this map. People need to keep talking about it in California because it does have severe implications for the nation. But yeah, a lot of it's in the people of California's court, and I hope that they do the right thing and help out us and the nation.
Me too. I hope they make me proud. Thank you so much for
My
coming
pleasure.
and talk to me today on a Saturday. I
Yep.
appreciate it. And I hope you get to enjoy Illinois because it is a great, I was there. I actually live there too. So
Oh, very good.
you're
Now,
hitting all of the great states.
yeah, yeah, it's very unfamiliar territory to be in a Democratic friendly state. So we've really appreciated the hospitality, and really people have just been incredibly supportive, and we really appreciate the support.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Representative Perez.
Yeah, my
Appreciate you.
pleasure. All right, take care.
I am so grateful to Representative Perez for taking the time to not only talk to me, but to help us all understand exactly what is going on in Texas, what is going on in California, and how we are stepping up in this moment. It is important that we keep talking about this because it is not going to go away. You need to talk loudly, to understand it, to be there as an American citizen to ensure that this is not going to happen. We are so grateful to have representatives, elected officials that are doing this work, that are sacrificing their time with their family, that have now arrest warrants out for them. This is an incredible, unprecedented time that I know of. So I am grateful to these Texas state representatives who have left their state in order to really make sure that this does not happen to the citizens of Texas. And I'm grateful to Governor Newsom, Governor Pritzker for welcoming them and for taking the lead in ensuring that we can do better, that we do better. So please pay attention and speak up. And for Californians, let's vote to ensure that we meet this moment because we can.